Good evening and welcome to Bupilong, a place of hope. I am your host, Tulo Musate. It is Heritage Month, and so on today's show, we bring you the story of a young man that has dedicated his life to telling stories of our heritage. As we celebrate 20 years of freedom in South Africa, part of our heritage is the story that brought us to democracy. It is the story that has many faces and sides to it. Here is the story told from the eyes of the little boy in the 80s. Take a look.
Recently, we saw the repatriation of the remains of Nat Nagasa, one of South Africa's most celebrated writers. The apartheid government had refused to give him a passport, so he left on an exit permit and died in 1964 while in exile. As the country celebrates Heritage Month, the return of Nagasa has sparked questions about what exactly it is that transpired for freedom fighters as they worked to liberate South Africa so far from home. Meet Tulo Musate, born in exile. His childhood was spent in Tanzania, where the Mwalimu Nyerere government at the time donated a piece of land in Mazimbu, Morogoro, to displaced South Africans and freedom fighters during the struggle.
In 1976, post the student uprising, my father was involved, was teaching, left for Swaziland with my mother and my sisters. I was born in Swaziland, later on 81, and thereafter when the pressure arose, he was sent to Tanzania in 1983. So that's how I ended up in Tanzania, and from there stayed from 1983 to 1989, after which we went to Spain, returned to South Africa in 1992. We were in a place called Morogoro. That's the same place where the 1969 ANC conference took place. And after Solomon Mahlangu was hanged, or after particularly the student uprising in 1976, there was an influx of young people from South Africa seeking to join different liberation movements, PAC, ANC. The ANC was advanced, however, through the support of UNESCO in building a settlement for the young people who came through. The ANC had to do that because it could no longer just give scholarships to young people. It had, because now there's so many young people, the scholarships were not enough. And it had to find a means to support young people who still needed to complete their education. So in its discussions with the Tanzanian government, at the time, Mwalimu Nyerere and the ruling party, they succeeded in being apportioned a portion of land to drive the education, provide education for young people, but also eventually provide accommodation for young people, some of whom were 14, who had left the country.
His time in exile as a child was influenced by leaders such as Oliver Tambo.
My personal experience of the crash is one of the best experiences I've had. And I think I understand why people say the ages of 1 to 6 are critical, because going through that experience and understanding, being able to meet someone like OR, who was consistently held as our effectively Jesus. And I'm not saying that, I'm saying because we didn't have a church there. So the person who represented the apex of what we want to achieve, what we want to achieve, was O.R. Tambo. And so when he came to the school, when he came to the crash, it was one of those exciting moments.
Frequent visits from Chris Honey would bring calm to times when the youth would become restless and sometimes violent.
This college, or rather the idea behind this college, was to prepare the South African youth, deprived of so many opportunities inside the country, to prepare them to play a role not only in our struggle.
The tensions of the experiences of being in exile are still an unspoken part of how South Africa fought for freedom. Exile conditions included opportunities in education, socio-cultural socializations, but also hardships and losses. Right in the middle of Mazimbu lies the remains of many South Africans, some of them children, who lost their lives before being able to return to their own country. Tulo talks about a great sense of sadness when he thinks about just how much he and many others had to endure.
The place was a political hotbed, so if I'm giving you political answers and so on, it's because that was the nature of the environment. But there's a longing, there's a deep longing to see what your country is like, to know that this is only a portion of your family, was also fueled that longing to say one day you will actually get to meet people who are your family, where they stayed, what they do, and get a fuller understanding of what it is to be a South African. There really was a fear. For instance, when the SADF, South African Defence Force, threatened to bomb Mazimbu, the facility, it was very scary. We were on high alert, so we were doing the drills, going under the table, what you're going to do and whatever. And that wasn't very exciting, in terms of feeling excited. But it was, and then, we had to dig trenches just next to the houses, where at least where I stayed, just next to our house, there was a trench. And you ask your mother, but now what is this for? And she says, she gives you an answer like, no, that's where you're going to be, Mafiga Mapun.
After the air break, we hear just how Tulo is using these experiences today as an adult in South Africa. Stay right here.
Murder-accused Oscar Pistorius could face at least 30 days in psychiatric evaluation.
Mr. Pistorius has a long history of generalized anxiety disorder that appears to have been increasing with time.
The state can ask for such an evaluation according to Section 78A of the Criminal Procedures Act.
Which is likely to have commenced at the age of 11 months when he was hospitalized and underwent bilateral below knee amputation.
So you agree with me if I say that he foresaw the possibility that he might have to shoot when he armed himself and approached danger?
Yes.
Make sure you don't miss Your World, weekdays between 11 and 12 midnight.
Good evening and welcome to yet another edition of Sports Live, the show that brings you the latest local and international news, live interviews with the who's who in sport. He's the first South African to wear a yellow jersey that was at the Tour de France this year.
It's the first time that we get a boxer who's recognized by the Ring magazine as the best fighter in the planet to visit our country.
And he's very close to world record pace. And in fact, it is a new world record.
When you cross the line, what went through one's mind?
None of the four of us knew who had won. The scoreboard is always on your left, but all of us tend to the right. No, we just waited for the country to go down. RSA.
That's Sports Live, daily at 8:30 p.m. on SABC News.
Welcome back to Bupilong, a place of hope with me, Tulo Musate. We continue with the story of Tulo Musate, having been born and grown up in exile. What was it like coming back home? And how does Tulo use these experiences to enlighten a younger generation? Take a look.
For Tulo, being a student of the Solomon Mahlangu Freedom College was a blessing in disguise when he thinks about just how much infrastructure, opportunity and support there was in that small town in Tanzania. A primary school that had all the relevant amenities, a nursery school that offered quality early childhood development, and a college that offered a wide range of courses with all the sufficient facilities.
If you believe that we can't be successful as a people because of what happened in South Africa, where they say you are going to be drawers of water, hewers of wood, then explain SOMAFCO. Explain the success of SOMAFCO. Explain the fact that we're a library, we're a science laboratory. Just explain this whole place, ANC Holland or hospital, where people could actually come to you because of your vision.
I am now in a position to announce that Mr. Nelson Mandela will be released at the Victor Verster.
In 1991, former President F.W. de Klerk announced the unbanning of South Africans that had been sent into exile. For many families, this meant returning home to families and familiarity. For Tulo, however, it meant going back to a home that he didn't know at all, so finding his place in South Africa was tough.
I think the initial challenges when we got back were finding the ability to develop friendships, because first you were going through a process of, okay, so how are, a bit exciting as well, but how are people, how do they interact, and what conversations do you have, what were their experiences. Kumbulekaya is an example of displacement, an example of the breakup of families. You can't divorce that from the consequences of apartheid. You just cannot do it. It's impossible. You don't see white people on Kumbulekaya. You know what I'm saying? You don't. Even if you had to, you wouldn't see many of them. So it shows you where did this system actually afflict people most, and that system afflicted black people most. It goes as far as exile, but it's not limited to. That's not the only impact of exile.
When Tulo reached adulthood, there was a need in him to tell the story of the Solomon Mahlangu Freedom College in Morogoro, Tanzania. Today, Tulo is the CEO of the SOMAFCO Trust that every year gathers young South Africans and takes them on an experience they've never had, but also shows and educates them on just how big of a sacrifice there was in the struggle for freedom.
But we're able to explain why was the school then called Solomon Mahlangu Freedom College. And be able to say this was for the purpose of completing the journey that Mahlangu himself couldn't complete. We had held high people like him due to their sacrifice, the willingness to be selfless, to the point of giving their lives away as young as they are. And that's what we try to achieve through the tour. Through the tour, we're able to show, number one, a model of community development that was enabled or done in Tanzania. We show you the purposefulness of that whole place in terms of focusing on young people. I think the vision was very clear that when they come out of here, there's a role they need to play in South Africa.
27 years have separated him from the world.
As we celebrate 20 years of democracy, the vital question is, for the freedom we enjoy, just how much did that cost us as a nation, and what more still needs to be done?
Because of so many years of oppression, of dispossession and so on, really the stories of our forefathers, of the people who brought 1994, is actually mainly the only assets that we have. Our stories are only assets. Dispossession means that you hardly own land. You hardly own any of the economic factors of production. So when you look at yourself as an individual, the one thing you do have though is those powerful stories of Mama Winnie Mandela, of Solomon Mahlangu, Chris Hani, of President Zuma, of President Mbeki, of all the other President Mandela, even President Motlanthe, we have their stories, and they just say that there was one thing that black people do have: the will to achieve freedom in every sense. So if they could do it then, and now we've got more space, our heritage should say we have the ability to actually carve the future that we want.
After their break, we talk about preserving our South African heritage with the CEO of the National Heritage Council, Ntate Sonwabile Mangcwetwa. Do not move.
Storms have affected several hundred families in low-lying areas on the Cape Flats. Disaster management remains on high alert. Residents have not yet been evacuated.
The area is prone to flooding and residents are weary.
Evicted Lwandle residents near Strand in Cape Town will spend another night in community halls.
They come with sticks here and all that other stuff. So what is going to happen to our children, to the people in the morning who's coming to the bus stop? Huh?
Primetime News, daily at 6 p.m. on SABC News.
Accra is a beautiful city of contradictions.
Funerals in Ghana are colorful and flamboyant. Ghana coffins are functional coffins made by specialized carpenters. These colorful objects, which have developed out of figurative palanquins, are not only coffins but considered real works of art. Each year, festivals and durbars are held in various parts of the country to celebrate the heritage of the people.
That's Kaleidoscope, Sundays 5:30 p.m. on SABC News.
Welcome back to Bupilong with me, Tulo Musate. And earlier on, we played the story of Tulo, who spent his entire life in exile, and he is now on a mission to share the experience with other young people. And now joining me in studio is Advocate Sonwabile Mangcwetwa, the CEO of the National Heritage Council, and we're talking about the importance of preserving our heritage. Ntate, welcome to Bupilong.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Okay, let's start off by saying how important is it that we, because it's Heritage Month, what's expected of us as South Africans?
What is expected of us as South Africans is to celebrate our heritage, is to be proud of who we are. Mm-hmm. It's also not only to be proud, but to take a very, good interest on our heritage, to be proud of our own identity and who we are. To be also emotional about our identity.
Sure.
To go there, use various platforms available to us and to celebrate our pride.
And looking at the story of Tulo, who spent his life in exile and now is back in South Africa sharing the experience, you find that with most of the people, most of our history happened outside of the country. How do we still hold on to that? Our own South African heritage.
Part of the mandate of the National Heritage Council of South Africa is to decolonize our African heritage. Mm-hmm. We have inherited heritage that has been distorted after many years of colonial and apartheid misrule. For more especially for young people, it's important. We do that to a number of ways. For instance, the project that we're talking about is our Liberation Heritage. We have a youth walk that we have now supported to partnering with Somafco Trust, which is really a flagship of the Research Council. It started 2 years back, wherein with the Heritage Council, takes young people, in partnership with Soma for Trust, to Tanzania. And if you look at the process of selection of these young people, it's also very rigorous because the young people are given topics to write on a variety of topics, political, social issues, economic issues affecting young people. Yeah. And the best is then chosen, and then here they go to Tanzania on a all-paid trip.
Yes. And
then there they experience, really. I mean, you know that South Africa has historic ties with Tanzania.
Yes.
And that stands back. I mean, if you saw the funeral of our statesman, Dr. Nelson Mandela, the president of Tanzania was there. So these young people, when they go to Tanzania, they go there now to experience this thing. They have read about Morogoro. They have read about these things, but they haven't seen them. They go to the grave, 97 graves of freedom fighters who died of through malaria. And they see this, and they see this Morogoro conference of 1969. This is where the ANC held its conference, the first conference after it was banned, out of the country. Of course, this was the second one. The first one was in Botswana. Lubatse, and then Morogoro in 1969. And this is where many decisions were taken, including the strategy and tactics of the ANC. So when they go there now, they see this. One of them said, I thought Morogoro was in somewhere in the north or in Italy and so on, and yet they can see that this Morogoro is still preserved. Even if you look at Solomon Mahlangu Freedom College, named after one of the most outstanding fighters, who was, hanged in 1979. You see that the college itself is still preserved.
Yes, yes.
You see the names, you see although now it's been handed over to government as a branch of university, it's still there. So we were proud about this project because it has gone a long way to open our horizons, more especially to young people, horizons of knowledge, to gain new knowledge, things that people are not there, the people are not aware. But it's also going to transform our education curriculum. True. Because we're also feeding this to the curriculum. Because, many people are products of Jan van Riebeeck, Vasco da Gama and so forth, all that, that history. But this is new knowledge, but also going to enhance patriotism amongst young people.
Yeah. Thank you, Ndate, for the information. It really is educational. Now, Ndate, you are from the National Heritage Council. And what's the work that the council does? And do you believe that people do understand what the council is there for, it's created for?
The mandate of the Heritage Council is in fourfold.
Yes.
We fund projects. Okay. We issue a call to the public for funding of projects. And so far, we have funded many projects. We have spent actually more than 40 million to South Africans and to ensure that there's the key projects, research, documentary, and so forth. But we also ensure public awareness by having a number of important programs, Heritage Awards, Ubuntu, social cohesion and so forth, but also transform our heritage. As I said, that we've inherited heritage that has been skewed, over a period of time. Sure. So the Heritage Council is an important platform because heritage is a strategic resource to nation building and national identity. Many countries that invest on the heritage, they're likely to do well in the economy. Ngugi wa Thiong'o, the famous writer, once made the statement that heritage is not just to be celebrated on certain days. We should be occupied about our heritage, who we are. By so doing, we're likely to contribute as citizens who are living in other fields of human endeavor. If you actually, so an investment in heritage is an investment in a healthy nation.
Sure. There's this big discussion about the 24th of September, which is South African Heritage Day. They call it the Bride Day, there's the Shaka Day, and of course it's also known as a Heritage Day. What's your take on that?
I think what's important about heritage, it's called Heritage Day.
Yes.
I think we should stick to that.
Okay.
But whatever we do, Because I mean our gripe about this Pride Day, it's on renaming the day. We don't have a problem. People can do whatever they want to do as long as, you know, we celebrate our heritage. You know, whether we do that to Braai, whether we do that to that, but the day is Heritage Day. But also we should also, you know, pay attention to the themes that are set there. So there's a reason for themes. You know, so. All we're saying to South Africa is that let's celebrate our heritage, which is vast, you know, but also, you know, honor the themes that are there. Not rename the day. You know, remember that we had Shaka Day, we had, you know, Batano Nondo's Day, you had this and that day, because we're coming from a very fragmented past. I mean, even our own main national anthems as South Africans, you know, that. But when we met and said, look, South Africa now is moving towards this trajectory of being a united non-racial country, you know, we then had public holidays. And these days, like for instance, Sharpeville Day, were renamed to say that, so that this is a Human Rights Day. Let's go and then honor, you know, the human rights culture in South Africa and celebrate that human rights culture. But also in Heritage Day, you know, let's have a Heritage Day. You know, ourselves, but ensure that there's unity of purpose, there's cohesion. You know, we don't, you know, really promote division of our ghastly past. That's why we're saying that let's keep this as Heritage Day.
Absolutely.
And not renaming it all sorts of, you know, Bright Day, this and that day, and so on and so on and so on. It's because it's going to further polarize us. But we're not targeting people to say that this is how we should celebrate. Other people's food, other people's cuisine, other people dance and all those things.
For joining us this afternoon.
Thanks so much.
Okay. And thank you so much to Tulo for sharing his story with us, and for you, our viewers at home, for tuning in. We'll do this again next week, same time, same place. Remember, you can always get in touch with us via our email address, bupilong@sabc.co.za. On Twitter, we are at Bupilong Show. As for me and the team that makes it all possible, it's a goodbye for now.